For Cash Flow Investors Live. Today we are supposed to talk about story time. So what does that mean? Well, today we're going to kind of talk about a real estate transaction and how sometimes things go wrong. And more than looking at somebody else and go, oh my God, it's kind of, he should have known better. I think a lot of times whenever we make a mistake, especially financially, sometimes there are some signs that you may that in person with a lot of experience may see, but somebody who doesn't have the experience does not see. Now, having said that, I want to make this very, very clear. What is experience? Experience is something that you learn when it's too late, right? And yet, the best of the best of the best in the world at anything, right? Especially as it comes to investing. So the two people probably, when it comes to investing in the stock market, that would be considered the goats of investing, as good as it gets in this world, that have a long history of investing, happen to be two guys by the name of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. Right. And if you ever have a pleasure of listening to them, one of their, the famous Berkshire Hathaway annual meetings that they do, right? It's a riot to listen to it. And a lot of it is, people may call it folksy, people may call it, old school. But guess what? That those old school ideas and principles, they work in the stock market and they work in real estate, right? It's very, very analogous. If you're investing in the stock market, if you're investing in real estate, or if you're flying, right, as a pilot, there's so many similarities in that. And I want to go back to that kind of today as we're talking about this. And what we want to learn from is not, what happened has happened, right? It's the past. Now the question is, what do I learn from it, and how do I draw the lesson? See, sometimes we make mistakes where we think. So a couple experiences I want to share. Number one is going to be my own. So this is back in 2013 or 14, I believe, maybe 13 or so. And I had a friend of mine that I had known, Freddie, and he had initially back in 2008, when I started investing, he used to own, or he still owns, I should say, these really, really successful cigar stores. At the one time, he had one in Hanover Park, big 8,000 square foot store. He has another one, huge one in over there in Lyle. That's about I think 15,000 square feet on one level, another, or 11,000 square feet on one level. There's a whole new level, another level upstairs. There's another one in Westmont. And I say that to say this, sometimes we'll look at people who are successful. I considered him a successful business guy, and I had a lot of respect for him. And he was the first person I partnered with on my deal number one. And for 2 or 3 years, 4 years, I did a bunch of partnership deals with him. And I was very grateful because he invested about $20,000 at that time. And I put in $20,000 from home equity loan. And it worked out. Over the years, I think he put in another 30 or 40. And when I paid the money back and I paid his return back, it was close to $2.5–3 million in return that I paid him back. And I was very grateful that at that time he threw in a $20,000. He said, man, I'm going to throw it in. Let's see what happens. Now I was doing all the work and it all worked out. I'm very grateful because I would not be here had it not been for him. Sometimes we need people that are that may invest for their own purposes, but yet it ends up changing somebody else's life. Now, 100% clear, I did all the work. It was my idea, my neck was on the line, but guess what? I needed a crutch. But what I did was this, that real estate part of it obviously worked out well. Yet, at one time, sometime in maybe 2012 or 13, sometime around that time, I remember having this idea, right? We would go to his lounge and would smoke cigars, talk real estate, and talk business. This was what a lot of times I used to do. And I'd made friends with a couple of the guys. One guy was a pilot, another guy was Coach Mike, we used to call him. And a couple of these guys were investing with me. And I thought just because I had succeeded in one business, I was going to take that and duplicate it in another business, and that was owning a cigar store. Here's Freddie making $300,000-400,000, $500,000 with the store. Well, why not me? I'm just going to duplicate what Freddie does. I'm going to follow his direction, and I'm going to duplicate what he's doing. And sometimes there are factors that you can do everything correctly, but that X factor does not hit, right? Now, there are some people, this is not to say that there are some people who they will touch everything they touch. It just goes down the toilet, right? That's just how it is. And then there are people on the other extreme that just have the Midas touch, which is where they touch anything and it just absolutely blows up, right? I would consider myself somewhere in between, that generally what I do will work out, but I always feel that I have to work at it. It doesn't happen just overnight. I tend to have to work at things, but that is how it is. Yet I opened this, we buy this property in Tinley Park, right on 159th Street. So you have good ingress, egress on the building, about a 4,000 square foot building. And we start rehabbing it. We're going to make this fabulous big cigar lounge, right? And by the time I was all said and done, we had about $400,000 dumped into the property, besides $500,000 that we bought the property for, the building with the land and that's sort of thing on main 159th Street in Tinley Park. And I say that all of it to say this: by the time I was done with it, I was ready to sell it, right? It was completely ready. We're a week from opening. And I say to Rahul at the time, I'm like, because Varsha had done all the drawings, Rahul had a couple $100,000 invested in the deal also. And I'm like, dude, let's just sell it. Let's just be done with it, right? And Rahul says to me, man, we did all this work. Let's just hold on to it. Maybe we're going to make money. And the reason we had done this was we thought this would be another way of creating a cash flow opportunity. And by that time, right, I always wanted to do talk about real estate. So I'd started doing real estate seminars, this and that sort of thing, that part of the business. And I was like, something, I enjoy this part of it. And even though at that time I wasn't making any money with it or anything, I was still like, I love sharing what I do with real estate. And I would rather stick to that. And at the time, and I'm going to take full responsibility because it was my idea. This whole idea was not Rahul's idea. Rahul doesn't smoke even cigars. So yet, he says, man, we should just stick with it. We have done all this work, blah, 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 blah. And I go along with the idea. Now, guess what? It's, take it 3 months down the road, 4 months down the road. I don't want to be there. I don't have the time. Rahul doesn't want to be there. And so we have somebody who is a young guy, and we put the responsibility of cigar store on his head, right? And I'm like, okay, man, go ahead and run with it. Now, this guy, the last job he probably had was basically with almost no responsibility. And so he goes to town with it on our dime. Right? He's ordering boxes and boxes of cigars. Everything's stacked high, and he's going to the Vegas to the show. So there's a big cigar convention, and he's putting in all these orders. And I'm going to, dude, how are we going to pay for this? Right? Because it's a simple business. You have inventory. The inventory needs to sell, and once you order all of this stuff, we got to pay for this, right? And it's $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 in product that's being ordered. And just because it's fancy boxes and these guys are basically sending him gifts, so our manager, quote unquote, is basically ordering all this stuff. And guess who's got to pay for it? Now, I couldn't pay attention to that business, and I didn't want to, because I had realized by the time the business was up and running, this is just not worth it. It's not something I can put time in. I don't have the propensity. And to do that, we ended up basically giving that business to somebody as a basically owner financing that sale for somebody. And we still own that piece of property as well as the business still, because we've not been paid back. Yet, more than the money, what I had done, and this was a mistake, which was I took a hobby, which is sometimes going out, sitting with Freddie, smoking a cigar, feeling cool. Oh my God, one day I'm going to build one of these. I took a hobby and I tried to turn it into a business. And a lot of times, people will say, follow, what do you love to do? Just do that. Just because once in a while I want to go grab a cigar and have a good time in terms of, talk real estate or whatever with a few friends, that does not mean that that's something that I want to do every day, or that's something that I want to sit there 8 hours, 10 hours managing that business, right? It's a retail business and it's a pain in the butt business. And probably one of the biggest lessons that I learned was, number one, just because somebody does something else doesn't mean I should be doing it, right? Because something works for somebody doesn't necessarily mean it will work for me. What you have to think about is, do you have the same level of commitment? Are you willing to put in the time? Are you willing to put in that sort of resources to be able to make that business happen, right? Sometimes just that, you understand, one of the most successful franchises in the world is McDonald's franchise. But once in a rare while, even those things fail. Sometimes you can have the right location, you can have all the right pieces, but yet you can't get it running to a certain extent. Because for me to sit there and make 100,000 or even 200,000 or 300,000, right, it's just not worth that business, because me putting a manager there and just hoping that I'm just going to make $200,000, $300,000 off the top and it's going to be a great business, clearly that did not work out. Second thing, probably what I learned is this, that you should stick to, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should, right? This is a profound thing that I've realized, is just because I can do something doesn't mean I should. And then the third thing was that the real riches in anything are in the niches, meaning you can't do 10 different things and be good at 10 different things. It's just not possible, right? Our niche happens to be buying single family, 2-unit, 3-unit, 4-unit type of properties. We can make a buttload of money just doing that. Why not stick to that? Why go try to be everything to everybody? That doesn't mean if somebody else does something really well, right? That doesn't mean that that's not a good thing. Great, good for them. People, if you think you can make really lot of money with raising capital, doing syndications, great, good for you. Not my cup of tea. I would rather basically buy the whole apartment building by myself, or I'd rather just raise the capital only on debt, right? I'm not going to give out equity and do it that way, because that for me works the best. That doesn't mean something is right or something is wrong, but you have to realize, what is your forte? What is your particular cup of tea? That's going to be the most profitable thing for you. So just because somebody else is doing something does not mean you should. This reminds me, this is 2012 or 13, same time. And I remember there's this pilot, and I can remember this clear as day. At the time, there was some sort of a guru company that was in town. Oh, that Montalongo guy, whatever, the crazy guy. I remember this guy goes to his seminar, and I'm walking into one of our flips in Hanover Park, and this guy's roaming around talking to the construction guys over there at the property. And I'm like, hey, man, who are you? And it's one of those guys who thought he knew it all. And he's like, oh, yeah, I went to the seminar. I'm going to do flips, blah, 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 all this. I'm like, okay, great. What do you do for a living? He said, well, I'm a pilot. I'm like, okay. How long do you think before you started basically flying commercially? He's like, well, I had to do 1,500 hours of training, right? I had to get my PPL, then I had to get my IFR, then I had to get my commercial rating, then I had to get twin engine rating, then I had to get my CFI, then double CFI, then I had to build up 1,500 hours. So that's 2 to 3 years of training other people, right? That's what happens. That's how people build up time. And then I went to training, then I did more simulation training, then I blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, you do realize, and then when you actually got in a CRJ, which is one of the small commuter airlines, you were sitting right seat, meaning you're not the captain, you're the first FO, first officer, and you did 2, 3, 4 years there. And then finally, after a check ride, they transfer you into a captain. So if you really look at it, that's a 6, 7, 8 year career path where now maybe you make 120, 150,000 bucks. He's like, yeah, that's right. I'm like, so you think you're going to get into real estate and tomorrow like that because you went to a 3-day weekend and you paid a bunch of money, suddenly you're going to be this flipping guru. He's like, well, but this is not that easy, man. Compared to flying, this is not that difficult. I'm like, okay, great. Let me know how that works out. He's like, well, actually, it's working out because I bought a property down the street. I'm like, really? What did you pay for the property? Now, mind you, I had paid $62,000 for the property we were standing inside, right? He paid $122,000 for the property down the street. And I'm like, okay, so you paid $122,000. How much do you think you're going to sell your property for? He's like, well, I think I'm going to sell my property for about $220,000. I'm like, you paid $122,000. You think you're going to sell it for $220,000. Your net margin over there is not, net spread is about $98,000. He's like, yeah, my property is much bigger than yours, Andrew, and that one is going to get more money. I'm like, probably so. Probably you're going to get more money for your property. But we're in 2012, right? The market is kind of here at the bottom of the market in Chicago. And I'm like, listen, man, every property that is selling in these areas, almost 80% of the flips are my flips that are selling. I mean, just look at the numbers. And every time I'm selling the property for a little bit less than the one before, reason is the market dropped, so I bought the next property for a cheaper price, so I can sell it cheaper. I was just undercutting the market. So if you're competing with me, Glendale Heights, Hoffman Estates, Streamwood, Hanover Park, any of those markets, right? The reason I was ahead of everybody, not because I was that smart, I was just buying them cheaper and I was selling them cheaper than anybody else. So my properties generally would sell quicker, not because of they were the best, but because people were very price sensitive. Hence, I could get them sold. And he's like, well, I'm just telling you it's going to work. I'm like, listen, I'm just suggesting something to you. Before my property hits the market, you may want to get your property on the market because you're going to get killed. He's like, how so? I'm like, man, I paid 66. You paid 120. Your property has 200 extra square feet than my property does. And that too is very stretching it. I don't think it's 200, but I think, let's just give it to you. I'm like, necessarily, if I sell my property for 160, 170, which is going to be mint condition, I can get it moved. And your cost probably is going to be higher than mine because your property is bigger, even if you can get the labor and material at the same cost that I got it. You don't have margin there, right? So even if he's like, well, that would be stupid for you to sell it for 165, 169. You should sell it for more. I'm like, I'm just saying. I'm like, I'm going to try 185, 190, but I don't know if I can sell it to today's market. I say that to say this. A month later, I put my property on the market. I put it for 190, didn't sell, 188, 180, I think 186. Property sells for 179. I bought the property for 66,000. Property sold for 179. I walked away with about 41, 42,000 bucks. As soon as my property sold, a month later, he puts his property on the market. Now he's in a September market. September, October, November, December, in a traditional market in the Chicagoland area, those are slow months. So when he put it on the market in September, my point to him was, man, what is your all-in cost? He said, well, it doesn't matter. It's the best property in the market. I'm like, no, it does. Because my suggestion would be sell the property, take a small profit, even if it's really, really small. He's like, well, that's going to be stupid. I did a lot of work. I'm like, how much work you did has no bearing on what the market will bear in today's market, right? Market will pay what it will pay, and that's it, right? How much work you do, there is no bearing on it. And ended up, he lists the property for $230, $220, $210, ended up selling the property $189,000. And my suggestion to him was, hey man, if the property doesn't sell in September or October, just take the property off the market. November, December, January, just let it sit. Your cost of carrying the property is going to be about $1,400 a month. So $1,400, what's that cost, right? The cost is somewhere around $3,500, $4,000, let's say. Now you put it back on the market in January, actually in February 15th, you'll sell this property. You'll sell the property around 210, 215 because the market is recovering. But right now you're in the middle of winter. You're not going to sell the property. And if you let it sit, right, you're going to have a problem. Just suggesting. Well, guess what? He's like, well, no, that's stupid. My coach, his coach, meaning, was sitting in Utah reading a book, right? Reading the manual on how to flip a property, is telling him, oh, this guy's wrong. Okay, no problem, right? My point is to say this. Just because he saw me doing something, and I'd done multiple of them, he tries to duplicate it without understanding the numbers. And he tries to duplicate it just because the idea is, well, you can buy low and sell it high. If it was that simple in real estate, that you could buy a property low and just sell it high without understanding the timing, without understanding the market, without understanding the square footage and the per square foot cost related back to how big of a house or small of a house you bought, and then how long does it take to put it back on the market, and then obviously your cost of labor and material. Guess what has happened? You're going to lose money every single time. Well, after his first flip, guess what happened? He closed up shop and he's gone. And he closed up shop not because he had basically overpaid for the property. It's the same thing. The cigar store that we still own today, by the time it's all said and done, I'm going to probably end up taking a $200,000 to $300,000 hit on that property, right? That just is what it is. And every time if I go to Tinley Park, one section of 159th Street, I certainly don't look to the right. If I'm going towards the east, is when I get to that cigar store, because that to me, it always just creates a level of stress, not because of the money today, right? It's clearly I haven't needed the money from that store for all these years, but it just is one of those things. And unfortunately, even though I had good advice from Freddie, even though I had all the factors, the one factor that I did not account for is who's going to run that business. I wasn't willing to run the business. Rahul wanted nothing to do with it. And guess what? Just to make $100,000, $200,000, it's not worth it. Now, an owner proprietor in that particular case, somebody who owns the property, that's what they do. That's the best amount of money that they can make versus doing anything else. For them, it may be a great business. But I realized it was not a business for me because I was trying to go to 30, 40, 50, 60, $80 million in net worth. I was not trying to own one little cigar store, right? And it was nothing wrong with it, mind you, right? Are there people who own chains of those things? Sure. But that was not somebody that was going to be me. So what my point of today's whole thing is that you got to be careful what things you say yes to, right? And there's a multitude of factors. When it comes to entrepreneurship, when it comes to growth, right, it's not quite as simple. There's a part of hard work, there's a part of aligning yourself with the right people, and then some part of it also has to do with luck, right? The same guy that I was telling you that has done very, very well with cigar stores, the store he had in Oak Brook should be a great location. Guess what? It never did well. For whatever reason, it never did well. Yet, the store in Westmont, the store in Lisle has done extremely well for him, right? A lot of times, entrepreneurship, there are some X factors that also enter into it. But if you're that person that basically everything that you have touched, it just blows up, clearly it's probably not the business, probably an element that you may want to self-examine. If you're that lucky person that has the Midas touch, anything you touch, boom, turns to gold, well, guess what? Then you're on your way to riches. Most people are hopefully not here, and they're probably not here. Most of us are somewhere in between. We're going to have some successes. We're going to have some failures. And even for the most successful people that we meet in this world, they have some epic failures. They just have more successes than failures. This is Andrew Holmes. If you're not a member of More Cash Flow Investors, make sure you join. Our goal every single week is to try to cover different topics, to try to cover different things as it relates to what we do in terms of real estate, in terms of entrepreneurship, and hopefully inspire you. Make sure you have your friends come and join, invite your family, invite other colleagues, or people that you think would benefit from being a part of a passionate group of real estate investors, and so that we can hopefully inspire them to do the same. Having said that, the next prize was supposed to be announced today, meaning what was the next drawing going to be? Like last one, the first one was a full set of appliances. That Trinidad one, second one was a cruise for two. That I keep forgetting her name, Miss Amal, and her husband won for the cruise. And the next one, we will announce that on Monday. We were supposed to do that today, and I just got a bit tied up in the office. Having said that, thanks a bunch, guys. Have a safe weekend. For those of you guys from Mastery, from the new Mastery, we'll see you tomorrow, or other people from Mastery, hopefully we'll catch you here at the office or online. Talk to you soon.